We're going to get on the way here, and we have a very good presentation for you today. What you see right there on that screen has been probably my passion since I became a pilot examiner, because I saw so many things during checks that shouldn't have happened, things that shouldn't have been there, that I realized that we needed to do something about flight training. And the vehicle that I'm using is, of course, doing instructional videos and presentations like this. Through what you see right there right now, I think, I didn't get any dual on this thing, okay? What you see there is the series of Flying Colors training solutions, and the series is called Flight Training Missing Links. And I guess that gives you an idea of where I'm coming from. This particular presentation is called the stabilized approach. And it is not really about, I'm not going to tell you how to do a stabilized approach. I mean, it'll take a long time. I don't think we're going to be able to do that in 45 minutes. This presentation is about is to bring out what I've seen to be the causes of the unstabilized approach or the destabilized approach. How many CFIs in the audience? Good. So this will be good for you, something to, you know, that you will go out there looking for these things, hopefully. Of course, the first thing, I need to welcome you guys, and I really thank you for taking time this morning to be here in the studio. And those of you who are in the cyberspace or TV land, the same thing goes to you. I don't think that as pilots we are never that tired that we cannot take a few minutes to sharpen the axe like we're doing here. Therefore, why are we here? Well, probably you're here to learn something. Hopefully, by the end of the presentation, I will be able to share some of my experiences to you that will be good for you to know. But I'm here to learn also. And here's how I learn. On the bottom of every slide that you'll see on that screen, you're going to see the address of my website. I learn when you ask questions, because I hope that you ask me a question that I don't know the answer to. That's it. I encourage questions, because if you ask me a question that I don't know the answer to, I'm happy, because I'm going to look it up and we're both going to learn something. And therein lies the difference of sometimes people don't want people to ask questions, but I do. I really encourage those. Now, during my introduction, I purposely asked the person that does the introduction to say my flight time. And of course, my experience in aviation. Number one, I'm not trying to impress anybody. I'm just trying to create a sense of credibility. In other words, hey, I belong to be here. Now, whether I'm going to say it's good or bad, that's for you to decide. I really don't know. I'm just going to talk about, I only know what I know, and I'm going to talk about that. But the thing about flight time, I think it's been a little bit overrated, because what is the most important flight time in a pilot's career? Have you ever thought about that? Have you ever think about that in those terms? You're probably thinking a whole bunch of stuff now, but I'm going to tell you what I think the most important flight time in a pilot's career is the next hour. That is the one, because that's the one that either going to make you or break you. The ones in the logbook, hey, they're there. And yes, they're good somehow, but they don't mean anything, because at what level of time or how much flight time do we need to have so we don't get into an accident anymore? Is there any? Because as a FAA inspector, I have conducted accident investigation on pilots with 31,000 hours. So flight time is really not the answer. The answer is a safety mindset. And I cannot pass a group of pilots and not share with you my safety message, which we can only choose two options in aviation safety. We can be part of aviation safety, or aviation safety must be a part of us. I'm not going to tell you which one you're going to choose. That's up to you. But I'm going to tell you one thing. I'm going to give you a little warning. Therein lies the difference between dedication and commitment in aviation safety. And everybody in our industry could be dedicated to safety, except the pilot. The pilot needs to be committed to safety, because once you're up there, that's it. You're it. I don't care if you have 3 radios and 2 GPSs. If you're in trouble, that controller, God bless him, all he can say is turn right, turn left, climb, descend, and what do you see now? That's about it. The rest is up to you. So don't let that create a false sense of security, whereas you are the individual that need to do that. It is not enough that we think a lot about aviation safety. It is not enough that we come to these meetings, these safety meetings. It's unbelievable. If you want to be a safe pilot, guess what? You have to become one. That's the only way to do it. And it starts with a frame of mind. That's all. You really need to be convinced that you want to be a safe pilot. And of course, no message can be completed, no safety message can be completed without the safety tip of the week, which is, if you're not comfortable with your situation, you're probably not safe. It's so simple. Folks, if the weather report makes you nervous, what makes you think that the flight is going to calm your nerves? If you, maybe you haven't done this, but someone has, at some point, they're going to the flight line, they're getting ready, and they say something like this. They go, it's clear. I don't like this. And no wind. Oh, this is really bad. Have you ever done that or said that? Never. Have you ever hurt anybody? No. But I bet you heard someone say this, or maybe you have said this on the way to the flight line. Where did these clouds come from? There were no clouds a little while ago. And look at the wind side. Oh my God, look at the wind. You know why you're saying those things? That's your own self talking to yourself. Because we know when we're going to do something that we shouldn't be doing. Unfortunately, unlike insects, we override our instincts because we can think. We can rationalize. Don't do that. Generally, if you follow your gut feeling, you're going to be doing the right thing. That is the way it goes. Now, let me show you 3 cardinal rules responsible for longevity in the aviation business. Rule number 1, you probably saw this already. Don't hit anything. That's a good one. Number 2, don't let nothing hit you. And number 3, don't do nothing dumb. This one, however, is very hard to observe, because we can't eliminate the unwise. And I use that word because I really didn't want to use the other word that you know I'm talking about. You can't eliminate that. I mean, we cannot change the process of natural selection, although we're trying. And we're trying very hard. The goal of the FAA through all these meetings and the FAASTeam and every inspector is to go to work and not hear there was an accident at such and such airport. We want to eliminate that. However, it's kind of hard and maybe impossible, but we're not going to give up. We're going to continue. But now, let me tell you, let me show you what happened just about month ago, my wife and I went on a cruise. First day, we come back, we go to the cabin, we go out, we do things, come back at night. I'm laying in bed, I'm looking to the ceiling, and I see this. I don't know if you can really see that. And it's a sprinkle. But then I see something around that sprinkle. And you know what it says? Do not hang articles from sprinkles. Now, somebody did that. That's a regulation right there. And I even talked to the safety officer, because I get interested in all this kind of safety things. And he says, we operate 19 ships, and we have over 2,000 incidents a year per ship. Not specifically this, but stupid things that people do. And they're out there. Have you ever looked in the back of a Preparation H box? You know Preparation H? You with me? You know what it says back there? Do not use orally. Now, you know, why? That's a regulation right there. Somebody did it. Oh yeah, they got that letter. Somebody, Mr. Preparation H, I've been using your product now for about 9 months, and I have seen no relief whatsoever. However, I just became the whistling champion in my state. And that could happen. But see, we cannot get rid of that. That is something that is here to stay with us. Disclaimer number one, just in case we have a difference of opinion, everything that I'm using comes from these books. The Airplane Flying Handbook, the Pilot's Handbook, and AC 6167, Stall Spin Awareness Training, and the particular PTS that involves takeoffs and landings. So that's what I'm doing. Now, I know that some of you will say, well, just because the FAA says that doesn't necessarily mean that it's correct. And you probably heard this. Actually, I used to say this way back when I didn't know any better. Well, the FAA says we do it this way, but in my book, we're going to do it this way. Until I realized one day, and I said, holy moly, where is my wind tunnel? I don't have a wind tunnel in my basement. To determine that this airplane that I'm flying is going to do better the way I think than the experts and the manufacturer. And besides, who wrote those books? Those books were written by industry in conjunction with the FAA. Those books were written by icons in our business, William Kirchner, Robert Buck, Robert Taylor, Barry Schiff, Yeager, test pilots, people that got together and determined which was the best way to teach how to fly. Not to fly, though. There is over 100 different ways to fly an airplane correctly. But there is only one way to teach how to fly. Why? Because these procedures and maneuvers have built-in buffers. You see, there are two groups of pilots. There is this group of pilots, not really, but this group of pilots, theoretically speaking, that is always correcting for things. And then you have this group of pilots here that is always anticipating things. There's a difference. You cannot teach a 2,000-hour trick to a 40-hour pilot because you're setting them up sooner or later for an accident. The reason why you get away with that trick is because you have developed that feel for flying that is lacking here. And that feel for flying comes with knowledge and experience. And this is what's happening with our approaches and landings. A lot of tricks are being taught, especially if you come from, if you're an airline pilot. We want now a guy flying a 172 to fly that thing like a 727 or a 737. This doesn't work. That's a 172. And it has to be flown that way. Because when this individual goes for a test, that's exactly how it's going to be tested. He should be tested by the book. There should be no questions. There should be no secrets. Everything should be on the up and up if we follow the book. Now, I see a lot of gray hair here and probably out there in TV land. There's probably a lot of gray hair also. Do you remember the Prego commercial? You remember the spaghetti sauce? Prego. It's in there. Remember? It's in there. That's the book. It's in there. That's 100 years of experience in teaching people how to fly in the written form. And I guarantee you that me or you cannot do better than that, although we fly totally different. You cannot teach the way you fly unless you fly the way the FAA says you have to teach. I mean, it's just a little confusion that we have there. Anyway, moving along, disclaimer number 2, I'm not the sharpest knife in the drawer. I got lost across country just like you guys did. Well, not lost, but temporarily disoriented because somehow I found my way back to the airport, or they found me. One time they did that. I was behind the airplane. Anybody remembers that? Sure. As a matter of fact, one day I was flying with my instructor, God bless him, and he looked at me and he says, Diego, you are so far behind this airplane that if we crash right now, you have to take a taxi to take it to the scene of the accident. That's how far behind that airplane you are. So I've been there. I bounced around on runways, and I failed my private check ride, which is probably the best thing that ever happened to me. So I came through the same way you guys did. But at some point, I realized that something was not right. I needed to look somewhere else. I needed to do things. This is my motto. You show me a pilot that can't answer a correlative question or can't perform a procedure or maneuver within PTS standards, and I'll show you a pilot without enough knowledge to understand what he or she is trying to accomplish. And you can take this to the bank. I've done over 6,000 checks, and most of the problems are not understanding. I do stress knowledge, because knowledge is what it is. Actually, Wilbur Wright said, we can fly without motors. This is a phrase that has gone down in history, and you probably heard it before. He says, we can fly without motors, but we cannot fly without knowledge and skills. And I wonder why he said knowledge first, even back then, because they knew that knowledge was the key. Now, let me show you flying colors formula for flying, which is 85% knowing and 15% doing. Not the other way around. What's happening today is pilots want to fly. They don't want to talk. They don't want to sit. I want to, because they think that by doing, they can get there. And little do they know that that's not the way it goes. Because the eye can't see what the mind doesn't know. When I heard that thing the first time, it went through me like a ton of bricks. The eye can't see what the mind doesn't know. You could be doing something wrong for 20 years and you don't even know doing it wrong. Why? Because your mind doesn't know any better. And that's the way you're going to keep doing it. And maybe that's why we had a cross-control stall here just about 10, 12 years ago, where 3 people died, right here on a Sun and Fun show week, because they didn't know. And I think that's what the main problem is. Why are we having so much problems with stabilized approaches and landings? Now, I cannot teach that here because it takes a whole bunch of stuff and a long time. Well, I'm producing a video right now, which is about a 3-hour deal that covers everything from pattern, slips, the whole thing, that all the elements involved in a, unfortunately, when someone asks someone, how would you define a stabilized approach? They say 2 things. On speed, on glide slope. That's a whole lot of other stuff that belong in that category. And we don't even, sometimes the students don't even know it, because I ask that during rides, even flight instructor applicants. The next thing I'm going to show you is, this is one of the main things that I find is a problem, is that pilots do not know the causes, consequences, and corrective actions of the following approach to landing errors, and they should be demonstrated by the CFI. Now, in this particular case, I use demonstrate. In another, when we move down the line, I'm going to talk about another list that talks about explaining. This is demonstrating, the other one is explaining. And we can demonstrate this safely. We can even do it at the airport, or we can do it in the practice area at altitude. And they are a low final approach. I've asked students, when you're learning how to fly, have the instructor demonstrated to you, not put you in the seat and tell you you're low. No. The instructor takes the controls and says, let me show you what a low approach looks like. And does a low approach and tells you, don't do that. Okay. And he or she is flying the airplane and you're watching without pressure. And he says the reason why we're low is because if you look here and you look here and you look here, you see the clues. That is not happening. The students is put in the seat. Actually, the first thing my instructor taught me when I started learning way back was how to sit properly in the airplane. I don't check rides where the individual is like this as we're taxiing. Like the neck trying to, because they don't have the proper visual clue. That can hurt on the approach and the landing. As a matter of fact, one time, this was so bad, I told the kid, I said, stop right here. We're on the approach end of the runway, and called the tower and I said, hey, I'm going to shut down. And so I shut down and I said, listen, I went outside and I said, here, tell me when you see my finger. Well, you need to come up. Tell me, you need to come on. Until finally, he saw my finger at a distance where, at a distance where he was be able to see. So we get in the airplane, crank it up again, call the tower, and as we get clear to take off, turn around, the kid goes, what's that? And I go, that's the runway. He says, well, that's the first time I've seen that. And it could happen, because if you are not careful, they would not know, and they would not tell you simply because they don't know. The eye can't see what the mind doesn't know. A high final approach, a slow final approach, not slower than normal. I'm not intending for the instructor to slow fly the airplane at 200 feet. No. If the approach is 70, you can do 60. This is 10 knots lower than, this is what it looks like when you start getting slower on your approach. Fast final approach, high round out. This is what happens when you flare too high. This is what happens when you have a rapid round out, too quick. There comes the ballooning after that and floating during round out. I have asked CFI applicants to explain. I don't want you to teach me how to land an airplane. Tell me the causes, consequences, and how do I prevent these things. A lot of them had no idea. Some of them didn't even hear the terms, which I think is sad. In addition to these compelling reasons, during my research, we came across three major culprits. Number one, the power on approach. Number two, the touch and go. And number three, the go around. And I know that right now, you're going to be saying, well, what does this have to do with the approaches? Well, I'm going to tell you right now. Let's talk about the power on approach. Let me make sure that I got. The power on approach. I was doing a flight review with the gentleman that owned a 182. Beautiful airplane, bought it brand new. Had it for about 9-10 years. Great pilot. We were out there in the practice area. All the air work was fine. I said, let's go do some pattern practice. And we came there, did some good landings. And one of those, I'm being the touchdown number, and the touchdown point, and I go, power off. Land the airplane. This man jumped so quick and pushed that throttle. I thought it was going to go through the instrument panel. And he said to me, we can't do that. This airplane is too heavy. This airplane requires power to land. And you know, in all my times of instructing or doing presentations, I hate to use sarcasm because I don't think sarcasm has a place, especially in the educational field. But I couldn't, and I asked, what do you mean? He says, my instructor told me that this airplane needs to be landed with power. The person that checked them out in this airplane. And I just couldn't think of anything. And in the borderline of sarcasm, I said, sir, is this airplane heavier than the shuttle? Because unless you don't know, the shuttle is a lot heavier than this aircraft and lands without power. So here's an individual. What is this individual what's going to happen to this individual when that engine quits? On-the-job training. And I think we have lost the sense of really why we try to get a private pilot license. The main goal of obtaining a private pilot license is to land the aircraft when the engine fails. That's the ultimate lesson that the pilot needs to know when he gets a private pilot license. And today, that thing is going by the wayside. Now, I understand that when I was coming up, I was always number one in the pattern. I'll be there at 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning, and I'm the only one in the pattern. Today, you could be 9, 10, 11. Embry-Riddle, for instance, one day I was doing a check ride over there. I was number 16 in the pattern. The pattern was down by New Smyrna. But that doesn't mean that every time you get the opportunity to do a power-off landing, do it. We're now into power-on approaches. We're losing the most important part of learning how to land an aircraft, and that's the glide. The glide is what gives the individual that sense of energy management. If I was FAA king, there will be an 8-hour mandatory endorsement of gliders for pilots, for power pilots, so that they understand really how these guys do this every day. And very seldom you hear somebody that hit something or didn't land what it was supposed to. Why is that? Why are they better than we are? I think that we're not touching on that area. I think, go to any airport. When you're flying, you'll see a person in front of you, number one, in a 152, and is doing a B-52 pattern, 4 miles out there, coming around to do the thing. And I wonder why. Why? Because we're used to that, and it's part of the norm. That was not the norm. The first thing I learned when I was coming up was the power-off landing. Now, when we go to the commercial and we have to show that, it becomes a problem. Why? Because it was not learned at the private pilot level. Why? Because it's not in the PTS, and it will not be tested. What happens in between? Because let me tell you, being out there in the field and the instructor saying, like I've done many times, power off. Where are you going to land? The student goes, over there. Okay, set it up. And then at around 800, 900 feet, you said, okay, go around. That doesn't cut it. That just gives the instructor a perspective that this individual knows what he needs to do on a pre-landing setup, not the actual landing. The actual landing needs to be done at the airport. Now, let me ask you this question. How long does it take for the average student pilot to learn landing an airplane? Think about that. I've had a lot of answers for that. I'm not asking for an answer now. I want you to think. I had answers like 4 hours, 3 hours, 8 hours, 10, 22 hours, 23. But the question is very specific, but we miss sometimes the point. And the question asks one thing. How long does it take for the average student pilot to learn landing? And the landings, my friend, begin at touchdown and ends when the airplane exits the runway on a taxiway across the whole short line and prior to the next taxiway. What's happening today is we're using the touch and go to teach landings. And let me tell you, the touch and go is the most counterproductive maneuver that we have in our business today, because we lost track of why that maneuver was created. Now, I started this campaign about 4 years ago, even before I left the FAA. And some of the schools that I had under my, I was the POI for them, adopted that. The touch and go was created, and there's a controversy whether it was the airline or the military. I really don't know, and it really doesn't matter. but it was created to practice what you already know. It was not created to teach people to land an aircraft. And the reason why it's counterproductive is because the pilot, while on approach, is not focusing on the approach. He's concerned about the takeoff. Ask them. Don't take my word. Ask. As a matter of fact, when you fly with somebody, and maybe yourself, like I did too, when you're getting ready to land, you ever notice how a pilot goes like this? Like he's trying to find some kind of a grip, because I'm going into a really, really bad thing now. You ever see those are body language, and they talk to you. I done so much flight instruction, over 13,000 hours of it, and I love it. But I did that instruction always with the idea of how can I make this better for the student. And that's why I saw a lot of these things that really, they were there for a long time and I never saw them. And then I started putting two and two together. And the culprits for the stabilized approach has nothing to do with knowing that it's on speed and on glide slope. It's a lot of other stuff that's in the mix that does not allow the pilot to really do it correctly. Now, here's the other thing. You go ahead and audit your logbook, and you're going to see that from 0 to solo, your average landings, if you came to learn how to fly from the street, you've never been in an airplane, the average landings are 97.6, according to my research. So I'm going to round it up to 100. And then what I like you to do is, when you do a touch and go, I want you to time the minute the wheel touch and the minute that your hand gets on that throttle and those flaps start coming up, you stop the stopwatch. On average, 6 to 10 seconds. Because the minute you hit that power, the landing has ended. You are now on a takeoff mode. And the most precious information for a student about how the landing should be conducted happens precisely after the touchdown, when the airplane starts to go from an aircraft to a land craft. And that is experienced only once, when the session of touch and goes ends. And still we don't know what the problem is? Please. Now, the average time from touchdown to power is 6 to 10 seconds. Let's imagine that you have 100 landings. Times 6, that's 600 seconds. You convert that into minutes. The answer to this question is 10 minutes. That's how long the average pilot spends learning how to land an aircraft. 10 minutes. Don't take my word for it. Verify this. Now, the other thing is that once that airplane lands, and now the power interrupts all the difficulty, it overshadows all the problems that the pilot will encounter as the airplane starts to slow down, and where the increase of control has to come in according to the winds and so forth and so on, is interrupted by the takeoff. And the pilot takes off. And now we as instructors proceed to tell this individual all the things that went wrong during the pattern. While this individual is trying to climb the airplane, listening to the tower, looking for traffic pattern altitude, airspeed, configuration, and everything we say as instructors, psew, 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 because I'm thinking about something else. Do you notice a little bit of sarcasm there? I think so. See what I'm saying? Now, if that individual does a full stop landing, taxis off, And at the approach end of the runway with the airplane stopped, the instructor says, Joe or Jill, when you were on base, you were a little late. Now, Joe and Jill, you have the complete attention of that individual. That individual is understanding what you say. Therefore, the learning of the landing becomes quicker and safer. And there's another side to this, which is the maintenance side of the aircraft. Have you ever been in an airplane, either as a student or as an instructor, where the wrong control application was made, like rudder or brakes or ailerons or power? You know how much stress that puts on the airplane every time you land and you try to do every time the airplane does this. I'm a mechanic too. Every time you do, there's a lot of stress going on through that airframe. Believe me. So it's counterproductive in all angles. It's only one. I did a Ben Franklin sheet, you know, where you put the pros and the cons, and I only have one pro. Save money. That's it. Because you do more landings, but that's after you know. That's after you learn. All right, the next thing that I want to talk about now is the go-around. Now, you have to agree with me on this, I'm pretty sure. Any landing, approach or landing incident or accident could be avoided if a timely go-around is conducted. Would you agree with that? Of course. But what happens? The eye can't see what the mind doesn't know. Two things. That's one. The other one is that usually the pilot is late in initiating the go-around. Why? Because it's not at the forefront. You see, this is the scenario of what's happening today. When we're teaching, and believe me, I'm in that group, was in that group until I realized this, and I extricated myself out of that group. When we are being the touchdown point, usually this dialogue takes place. The instructor or the student says, I'm going to land on the numbers, or 1,000 feet, or the 500-foot marker. And if something doesn't look good, I'm going to go around. Although the term go around was issued, the decision to make a go around has not been made. The decision to land, yes, we're going to land. We're committed. Right now, we have a culture of pilots that are committed to a landing. If you don't believe me, think back. How many go-arounds have you done in the past? You know, I done a check ride private pilot, 112 landings from zero to solo. And I go, man, you got to be good. And he goes, why? I said, you notice a little sarcasm there? You know why? Because you only did 2 go-arounds in the whole thing. So 110 landings were A-okay. Why it took you so long? You get my point? Go back and audit your logbook. I got this thing, audit your logbook, and you will see that if you have more than 2, you're lucky. Because the commitment is to land the aircraft, and we're going to land that aircraft regardless. When the instructor and the student should call the landing off the minute something gets unstabilized. The first thing that gets unstabilized in the learning stage, the person needs to say, going around. Now, if you're a pilot with experience, there are things that you can do to fix a situation. And we all know that, because I see a lot of experienced pilots here. So I'm not trying to teach anybody how to fly an airplane or anything like that. But You're learning. This person doesn't know. That doesn't look good, you go around. Actually, you make it the carrot in front of the stick. In order for you to touch down, you got to give me a good approach. And then they get into the rock. But the way it's being done now, so I suggest that when we're going to land an aircraft, both the instructor and the student will say something like this. This is the touchdown point, and this is a go around. If everything looks good, I'm going to land the airplane. At this point, the decision to go around has been made. It is a go around. The only thing that is going to prevent this from being a go around is that I don't unstabilize this thing until I get to the touchdown point. You get my drift? And if you're an IFR pilot, same thing. Because if you're going down to the nitty-gritty somewhere, that is a missed approach. Unless, when you get to the MDA or the DH, you see whatever it is you need to see that would allow you to continue. But up to that point, it's a missed approach. You're not doing an instrument approach to a landing. You're doing a missed approach. And it's a big difference doing instrument work here in Lakeland at 3 o'clock in the afternoon with a beautiful sky and no clouds under the hood than to being out there in Utah in the mountains somewhere at 2 o'clock in the morning, raining, snowing, the mother-in-law crying, and the dog barking. It's a totally different story, my friend. So we really need to think about these things. Now, stabilized landing. Remember, we hold a perfect record in aviation. We haven't left one up there yet. They all have to come down. I mean, that's just the way it is. But remember that the angle of arrival is inversely proportional to the possibility of survival, which means a large angle of arrival is a small possibility of survival. Now we're going to talk about the landing. The causes, consequences, and corrective actions of the following landing errors should be explained. And I want to make sure that we understand this. The other ones were demonstrated. These are explained by the CFI before solo. Late round out, wheel borrowing. I've done check rides at the CFI level, and the CFI applicant could not explain to me what the term wheel borrowing means in our business. Actually, go out and check. Just throw it out and see how many people know about this. Hard landings, bouncing during touchdown, purposing, touchdown while drifting, touchdown while crabbing, wing rising at touchdown, and of course, eventually the infamous ground loop. Pilots need to know this. They need to know why the things like this happen, and how to recognize them and how to prevent them. Because remember, the eye can't see what the mind doesn't know. It's so simple. It is what it is. I'll tell you, how much time do I have left? How much? 3 minutes? Okay. I think it was Albert Einstein who said to keep doing the same thing, expecting a different result, is pure insanity. So why don't we try something else? Don't take my word for it. Just give it a shot. If you're a pilot, try to avoid the touch and goes. Concentrate on your landings. If you're a CFI, do the same thing and see if it works. If it doesn't work, please send me an email and let me know. I want to know that because I'm really pushing for this thing. So before I leave, I want to leave you with this thought. May you always enjoy strong tailwinds in all your missions. May you always enjoy Kabul or any compatible existing weather with your experience and limitation. May you always land with the fuel reserve untouched. May your judgment system always show 3 greens. May the propellers of your knowledge never stop turning. May the hinges of your proficiency never rust in place. Because if you heed all these, the chances of your wings losing a feather are nil. Have a great day and fly safe.